All right, today we're going to unravel a story that is just, well, it's mind-blowing. It's about a barefoot mystic from the Himalayas whose quiet wisdom ended up secretly shaping some of the most powerful people in modern technology. So let's just jump right in with a question that sounds almost impossible. How on earth does a spiritual master, a guy who literally owned nothing, connect directly to the founders of the companies that basically run our world today? The answer is a man named Neem Karoli Baba, or Maharaj-ji, as his followers lovingly called him. And his story, you'll see, is this incredible bridge between ancient, timeless wisdom and the super high-stakes, fast-paced world of tech innovation. Now, to really get a grip on this, we actually have to start at the end of the story, or at least not at the beginning of his life. We have to start with his most famous and, let's be honest, his most surprising followers. Okay, so check this out. When a young Steve Jobs was backpacking through India in the 70s, searching for, some kind of deeper meaning, this is the man he was trying to find. And then decades later, when Facebook was in serious trouble, it was Steve Jobs himself who told a struggling Mark Zuckerberg to make the exact same journey. Just think about that. Two generations of tech visionaries, both pointed toward the same remote, spiritual source. So, who was this man at the center of it all? To really understand his incredible influence, we've got to go way back to the start of the 20th century, long before anyone had ever heard of a place called Silicon Valley. He was born Lakshmi Narayan Sharma, and he came from a pretty well-off family. You'd think he had it made, right? But from the very beginning, it was super clear he was just different. The world around him was all about status and money, but all he cared about was spiritual devotion. And his life definitely didn't follow a straight line. He was put into an arranged marriage when he was just 11 years old. But that spiritual pull was so strong that he left home soon after to become a wandering holy man. It was only his father who eventually convinced him to come back. So he did. He lived a normal life, had a wife, 2 sons, and a daughter. But here's the thing. Secretly, he was living the life of a master yogi. He was balancing these two completely different worlds at the same time. So how in the world does Lakshmi Narayan Sharma, the family man and secret yogi, become the world-famous Neem Karoli Baba? Well, the whole story pivots on one single, legendary event that happened back in 1958. Okay, you gotta picture this. He's on a train, sitting in a first-class car. The ticket collector comes around, but he doesn't have a ticket. So the collector gets angry, is pretty disrespectful, and just kicks him off the train at the next stop, a tiny little village called Neem Karoli. And then something really weird happens. The driver goes to start the train again, but nothing. It just won't move, not an inch. They check everything, the engine's fine, the track is clear, but the train is just stuck, completely and totally stuck. People on the train start getting nervous, and then they start whispering. Someone points out, "Hey, wait a minute, you kicked that holy man off the train and now it won't move?" So the officials, totally desperate at this point, they run over to the sadhu, who's just sitting there peacefully under a tree. They're begging him, please get back on the train. And he says, okay, he'll get back on. But he has 2 conditions, and they weren't for himself. First, he says, the people of this village, they need a train station. You have to promise to build one. And second, from this day on, you will treat all holy men, all sadhus, with respect. He used his power not for himself, but to serve others. The officials couldn't believe it, but they agreed to everything. And the very second he stepped back onto that train, it just started up like nothing had ever happened. As you can imagine, the story of that miracle spread like wildfire. And from that day on, he was known as Neem Karoli Baba, the Baba from Neem Karoli. So what was this guy all about? I mean, what was the actual philosophy of a man who could stop trains with his mind and inspire tech billionaires? Well, turns out his teachings were incredibly simple, really direct, and totally universal. The entire foundation of his philosophy can be boiled down to one simple, powerful phrase, sub-ik, which means all is one. Now for him, this wasn't just some nice fluffy idea. It was reality. It meant that every single person you meet, no matter their religion, their job, their background, is just another form of you. We are all the same divine consciousness. And when you really start to see the world that way, well, it changes everything. So, if we're all one, how are you supposed to actually live that truth day to day? His answer was a simple 3-step practice. Love, serve, remember. Love everyone, because they are you. Serve anyone you can, because helping others is the quickest way to feel that oneness. And remember God, or the divine, or whatever you want to call it, in everything you do. That was pretty much the whole path. Simple, right? And the final piece of the puzzle was just as straightforward: speak the truth. For Maharaj-ji, this wasn't just about not lying. He taught that truth itself has a power, that when you speak truthfully, you align yourself with the way things actually are. So these three pillars, all is one, love and serve, and speak the truth, that was the heart of his teaching. All right, so how did these incredibly simple ideas make the journey from a tiny village in the Indian mountains all the way to the boardrooms of Silicon Valley? Well, that's the next and maybe most amazing part of the story. You have to remember what was happening in the 60s and 70s. The whole counterculture movement sent this wave of young Westerners to India, all searching for something more than materialism. And a lot of these seekers, they found their way to this humble guy wrapped in a blanket. They became the bridge that carried his wisdom back to the West.
And this is where his influence just explodes, because these Westerners didn't just learn from him. They became cultural translators. Get this, a Harvard professor named Richard Alpert becomes Ram Dass and writes Be Here Now, a book that basically introduced these ideas to millions. Musicians like Krishna Das and Jai Uttal took the heart of his teachings and shared it through music that reached a whole new audience.
So you can literally trace the path of his influence. It's like a ripple effect. It starts with the simple, pure teachings of one man in India. Then it gets amplified and carried to the West by these disciples. And from there, it filters directly into the minds of the people who would go on to build our modern digital world. It's an absolutely incredible chain of events. Neem Karoli Baba left his body in 1973. And this was, ironically, just a few months before a young Steve Jobs finally arrived in India, hoping to meet him in person. But his physical death wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. In fact, you could argue his influence only got stronger. So what's the big takeaway here? I think the story of Neem Karoli Baba is this powerful reminder that the deep human search for purpose, for connection, for a way to serve others, that search is universal. It doesn't matter if you're a holy man under a tree in India or a CEO designing the future in a California high-rise. And it makes you ask the question, right? In our own crazy, complicated, hyper-connected lives, what simple truths are we overlooking?